Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the February Mentor Zoom. It's hard to believe it's already February. We only have 4 more months, believe it or not, in the 2024-2025 school year. All right, so let's get going. Like I said before, I have a lot of information to share this afternoon, so let's just jump right into it. What you're looking at is the schedule for February as all the other months. I ask that you attend the Mentor Zoom. Thank you for attending the live version. I also ask that you meet with your mentees 3 times in the month of February. That would be February 10th, February 18th, and February 24th. And I'm going to be talking about the classroom visits that are beginning in February. I talked a little bit about them in the January Mentor Zoom, but hopefully you've talked with your mentee about that classroom visit. Also notice that I am starting to add specific items into our Zoom. We have three special ed mentors. And so I want to make sure that I'm capturing information that's pertinent to their specific role, as well as providing resources. All right, so let's have a look at what those mentee visits should look like. My hope is that you're going to have an opportunity to go into your mentee's classroom in the month of February, again in March, and then again in April. Remember that when you meet with your mentee, you're only getting your mentee's perception of what's happening in the classroom. So when you go into the classroom visits, you get a new perception, and that opens up opportunities to provide additional resources. So in February, it would be good for you to see language arts if you are an elementary teacher and your mentee is an elementary teacher. If you're in middle school or high school, it would be good to see a specific period. When you move into March, elementary, it'd be great to see math, and then a different period for secondary folks. And then in April, it would be good to see writing. And then again, in secondary, another different period, because everyone knows that different periods have different dynamics. And again, it just opens up opportunities to provide additional information, resources, and feedback for your mentees. A lot of you are reaching out to me with dates. That's perfect. If you prefer to have a sub, you want to reach out to me with the date, and then I do some paperwork on the back end, and then you'll get a sign-in prior to your classroom visit, and then the hope would be that you would get that signed and returned back to me. And on that email with the sign-in is all the information to fill out your time card. And always, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Okay. So today we're going to be really diving into engagement. Remember the lesson look-fors that I introduced last month. When you go into your classroom visit, I'm asking that you capture some big ideas, just some big ticket items. Looking at what's the learning target? What do you want? What is the mentee wanting students to know or be able to do? Engagement. How is your mentee engaging the students into that content? Checks for understanding, and the closure piece. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about engagement. Last month we talked about learning target. Today we're talking about engagement. Now, what you're looking at in front of you is 3 different kinds of engagement. When we think about those 4 big ticket items, learning target, engagement, checks for understanding, and closure, again, we looked at learning target last month. When we shine the spotlight on engagement during our Zoom tonight, I want you to know that there's 3 different kinds of engagement. Behavioral engagement is all about, are students doing what they're being asked to do? What are they being asked to do, and are they on task? Are they focused? Effective engagement speaks to how students feel about the lesson. Do they like it? Are they interested in the topic? How do they feel about the topic? Last is cognitive engagement. This kind of engagement is all about learning. Did the students learn what was intended? Was the learning target achieved? The Charlotte Danielson framework looks at engagement in this light. Domain 3C is all about, did the student learn what was intended for them to learn? Because we are all evaluated on cognitive engagement, I think it's important to frame engagement in this way. So engagement is a loaded term, and I think every teacher has their own perception of what good engagement looks like. Charlotte Danielson, again, in the frameworks, encourages the beginning, middle, and end lesson design. This is pretty generic, but a good place to start. All lessons have a recognizable beginning, middle, and end. Now, what you're looking at in front of you is page 71 from, I call it the white book, because you should have two pieces of text that are in reference to Charlotte Danielson. You should have a book that describes all the components and all the domains in the Charlotte Danielson framework. However, the white book is a little bit different because it frames the evaluation instrument in a different light, in that it specifically tells exactly what component, what each element, what each domain should look like in the classroom, and gives classroom examples of that. So here is what Charlotte Danielson on page 71 says about engagement. So I'm going to give you a minute to just read through this and just silently reflect. How does this affirm or contrast your perception of what good engagement is? So I'm just going to give you just a minute to read through page 71 in the Charlotte Danielson White Book. All right, so again, that's what the white book says on page 71 about engagement. And that's really where we need to frame what engagement should look like in the classroom. Okay, so now let's start digging into each week of the mentoring weeks. So for the week of February 10th, I ask that you revisit pair conferences. Yep, they're coming up again. You'll want to revisit the fall conferences with your mentee, and it is worth a conversation to reflect on fall and what might change for the February conferences. SPED and itinerant teachers don't generally have parent conferences in the same way general education does. What you do have is IEP meetings. So if you're mentoring a SPED or an itinerant teacher, check in with them about IEP meetings and how that is going. This is a great time to problem solve and answer specific questions about IEP meetings. This month, we're also talking about lesson design and engagement. It is good to expose your mentee to different lesson designs as they're building their own pedagogy and style. So for the week of February 10th, we're going to talk about beginning, middle, and end, and the I do, we do, you do frame. So again, like I mentioned earlier, in the white book, Charlotte Danielson recommends that there is a recognizable beginning, middle, and end to a lesson. So that's definitely a lesson design, and that's what our evaluation instrument is looking for. So if you're old school like me, you already know that I do, we do, you do model. And this is the model that Science of Reading encourages, and has a lot of research behind it. Now, if I have not been in teacher prep classes in 30 years, and I don't know what they're teaching in teacher prep. So having the opportunity to talk with students and see what their level of familiarity is with these different lesson designs is only going to create more options for them and build capacity in them as they develop their style, as they develop their the way they are going to deliver lessons to students. So the I do, we do, you do is all about that guided release of responsibility. The teacher models, that's I do. Then the teacher allows students to try it on. That's that we do, the guided practice. Giving the students a chance to try on the skill falls into the we do. Last, after modeling and guided practice, students transition to independently doing the skill, and that's the you do. Very often, new teachers to the profession they'll model and then they'll transition students to that independent practice without giving them a chance to practice that skill. And that's super important, that meant that students and mentees know that middle section, that guided instructions, is super important, because that's where teachers address misconceptions. They provide feedback to students. And the last thing we want students to do is to be practicing a skill incorrectly. So also, there is research to support an added step, y'all do, where the teacher models and then the students practice under the guidance of the teacher, or students work collaboratively, and that's the y'all do, before being turned loose to work independently on their own. So again, this model shifts the learning from teacher to students through that we do scaffold. And what I really want new teachers to take away is that the we do is a scaffold between modeling and independent practice. The we do and the y'all do is a critical part of any lesson. And if teachers aren't doing that we do or y'all do, it's a missed opportunity to check for understanding. Okay, so for the week of February 18th, we're going to continue focusing on engagement. However, if you've already done your classroom visit, it's a good opportunity to do a debrief on that classroom visit. The lesson look for document, I'm not asking that you upload or you share that information. I mean, the information that you take from the lesson look fors, that's private between you and your mentee. However, what I do recommend you do is debrief with your mentee, because your mentee wants to see that document. So the debrief. So if week 8 if the week of February 18th works out for that debrief, great. If it doesn't, make sure that you build in some time to debrief your classroom visit. And also, I wanted to include some information on engagement strategies in this week, as well as the instructional day. Your mentee may or may not know that they have an instructional day every single year. So this might be a good week to remind them or let them know about it, so that they can strategically plan their instructional day before they lose it at the end of the year. Okay, so let's talk more about these lesson look fors. Again, you may or may not have done a classroom visit yet, but if you have, remember that debrief is important. And when you go into the classroom visit, I'm not asking that you scribe everything the teacher says. I'm not asking that you write anything more than maybe a phrase about just to capture the big ideas of the lesson. So what you're looking at is a sample. You'll notice that the learning target, I just wrote a phrase, produce or write digraphs. I wrote a couple of different engagement strategies, and then the particular checks for understanding were the whiteboards. And then the closure was simply the teacher reiterated the 4 digraphs in this particular lesson. So just a short phrase in each part of the lesson look fors. But what I want you to notice is that under the box, what went well, I want you to fill that up with all the things that you see going well in that classroom. That's the most important part, is to be your mentee's cheerleader and let them know all the things that they are doing well, because inevitably they're not going to be thinking about the things that are going well. They're going to be thinking about the things that are not going well. So please be your mentee's cheerleader. And what you see on the upper right-hand corner is that feedback triangle. You'll notice there that at the bottom of that triangle, positive-based feedback is, you want to do that as often as possible. Learning-based feedback should be done moderately. It's in the middle of that triangle. And then concern-based feedback, that's the principal's job. It is the principal's job to come in and let them know about concerns they have with their instruction. Also, the last part of this lesson look for is, you'll see the question in the bottom right-hand corner. It's good to scribe a question just to kind of, it's so that the question drives where you want the conversation or the debrief from the classroom visit to go. Okay, so that's a sample of what a lesson look for could look like. So now, again, on the week of February 18th, we're continuing to talk about lesson design. Now, Madeline Hunter is probably fairly antiquated, but it's still a solid lesson, a lesson style that I want your mentees to know about. So whether they're familiar with it or not, please remind them about the Madeline Hunter lesson plan template. You know, and it's a 6-step process that is very similar to the I do, we do, you do. However, it really it describes it in more detail with the anticipatory set happening first, then the modeling. Anticipatory set first, then what's the learning objective, then the inputs. So then on to modeling, checks for understanding, guided practice, independent practice, and closure. So it's just a more descriptive way to design a lesson. So I've always called this particular lesson design model the hourglass model, but I guess it has a real name called the workshop model. The hourglass approach is a variation of Madeline Hunter approach in which small group instruction is incorporated. If you remember the Madeline Hunter framework, there's no small group instruction included. So this hourglass model incorporates that small group focus. So you go from whole group instruction to small group, and then back to the whole group again. And the anticipatory set, the learning objective, and the modeling happens during the whole group instruction. Small groups occur as a result of the checks for understanding and differentiation opportunities, and then the students return to the whole group instruction for closure and reflection. So this is another model for lessons that is good to expose your mentees to, so they have a broad range of lesson styles as they develop their own personal pedagogy and lesson style moving forward. Okay, so now the 4 models that I gave you were just kind of generic models that are out there, and some teachers prefer one over the other. But this particular image that you're looking at pertains to SPED instruction. Direct instruction is super important in the SPED world. While I've introduced lots of different lesson design styles, direct instruction is the bread and butter of SPED teachers. In the context of science for reading, it's a proven method for student learning. Similarly to many of the lesson designs, The teacher is introducing new content, providing guided practice with feedback and addressing misconceptions before moving the student or the group of students to independent practice. That last step is always evaluating and reviewing the internalization of the content. Then teachers do it all over again with a new concept, and the cycle goes round and round. So this is just another variation of all the other models that I've been showing you. Okay, so now, applied behavioral analysis is a way to teach behavior as well as academic content. And you're going to hear that acronym ABA more so in the SPED world. And I don't confess to be an expert in the SPED world, but I do know that this is a particular approach that has been very successful for students with IEPs. It uses a methodology that breaks a skill into smaller parts, teaching each part individually until mastery before introducing another part. This breakdown of sub-skills is called discrete trial teaching, and it can be very successful. So this is a SPED resource. And then again, in the SPED world, workstations are super important because it gives students another opportunity to learn and practice a skill. Remember that students with IEPs need multiple opportunities. Direct instruction, discrete trial training, and workstations provide those multiple opportunities to learn the skills. Okay, now we're still on the week of February 18th, and we're talking about engagement. So I do have some resources for you to share with your mentee. The district has done quite a bit on PD on Kagan structures. And the whole idea behind Kagan is getting 100% of students engaging in the content. I mean, that's the goal overall. We're talking about total participation techniques. The goal of engagement is to get all students, no matter what their skill level is, to participate in the lesson. So doing a structure prevents students from hiding in the classroom, and every student is held accountable for the learning. And that's really what we want. We want students to be held accountable for the learning. Appointments are another way to partner students up and get them moving around the classroom. Again, that expectation that 100% of students participate in the lesson. So your mentee is there's a high likelihood that your mentee is already familiar with many of these strategies. And so there'll be some links to with explicit instructions to deliver the structures plus Blackline Masters. So I have all those resources for you sitting on your Foursquares. I'm not going to drop those into the chat because I want to move on, but just know that I have Kagan resources for you, and I have all the resources that you're looking at right now. They're going to be available to you on your Foursquare. Okay, so here's the activity that I really wanted to get to. We're going to watch a 3-minute video together. And again, it's only 3 minutes, but when you think about sitting down and watching a lesson, this is a good opportunity to pull out what engagement strategies are happening in this video. So the teacher doesn't, she does call out the learning target. She doesn't call out the learning target when the video starts. She calls out the learning target a little bit into the video. However, what I really want you to be looking at are engagement strategies. So when you see an engagement strategy that you might list when you're doing your classroom visit, go ahead and drop that into the chat. So let's go ahead and watch this video, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Again, your task is going to be to type in engagement strategies as you see them employed in the video.
Let's read this bottom model sentence.
The teacher reproached the students because they were disrupting
What type of sentence is this sentence? Jennifer?
It's complex
Complex. Can you tell me why?
because there's an independent clause and a dependent clause.
Thank you. What is our dependent clause?
Because they were disrespectful.
Okay. When you write your sentence, you will be writing a complex sentence. Thank you.
Okay, so there she calls out the learning target. They're going to be writing a complex sentence. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with the way she addressed the learning target. However, I always recommend to any teacher that I'm mentoring or working with just to be super transparent. You can start out the lesson and just say, today we're writing a complex sentence so that students know exactly what is expected of them. She kind of wrapped that learning target in, it wasn't fully transparent. However, when you work with your mentee, it's perfectly okay to call out the learning target. What do you want students to know or be able to do right at the beginning of the lesson? So there's no mystery.
Jennifer. We have our spelling word, reproached. Can you identify, can you make connections with the words in our sentence to help you define reproached?
Disrespectful.
Because they were disrespectful. Disrespectful is an excellent clue. Brody, can you give us the definition of reproached?
To give a lecture and correct what they were doing wrong.
Oh, okay. So you're saying to correct. So if we put correct in there, the teacher corrected the students because they were disrespectful. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we have our word reproached and we have our word persevere. Your challenge is to come up with a word or come up with a complex sentence with the word persevere or reproached, and you will be underlining the dependent clause just like I showed you in our model sentences. It looks like we're finishing up. A's, please share your sentence with your partner, and B's, you will share right afterwards. Go ahead. Can you verify what the sentence you have on your board? Is it complex? To help make sure it's complex, why don't you underline your dependent clause? Now look at your spelling word, persevere or reproached, and circle it. Label the part of speech. Is it a noun or a verb? Label your spelling word. Okay, can I have a volunteer to share their sentence? Ethan?
The teacher reproached the bully because he was picking on a smaller kid.
Excellent sentence. Why don't we as a class read Ethan's sentence?
The teacher reproached the bully because he was picking on a smaller kid.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so thank you, Jennifer. Yes, in this video, we saw choral reading, right? She was engaging the students in that content by having them chorally read. And she was doing absolutely doing some questioning. Holly, thank you. She definitely was using whiteboards. She had students writing on whiteboards to again engage in the content. Anything else that you guys saw as far as engagement goes? What are some other strategies that teacher used to engage the students in the content?
She had him turn and share with a partner instead of the whole group. I think that's a really good.
Absolutely. She did a partner share. Fabulous. Yes. And she called on specific students. Absolutely. And also what I also noticed is that she was having them underlining the dependent clause because she really wanted to bring attention. So she was helping them dissect that complex sentence by underlining the dependent clause and labeling things. So those are all ways to engage students in learning. So if you were doing your lesson look for, When you're doing your lesson look for, you might write just choral reading, whiteboards, underline and label. So those are so it's, you can just use simple phrases when you're doing your classroom visit. You'll notice here on this particular one, I wrote the learning target. It was simply write a complex sentence. Here's the engagement piece. And the closure was the choral read, right? She had them chorally read a complex sentence to reinforce what a complex sentence looks and sounds like. Now, we didn't see any checks for understanding in there because it was only a 3-minute video. However, that might, if you're doing your classroom visit and you don't see a check for understanding, maybe that's a question that you ask. How, maybe you ask your mentee, how were you checking for understanding? That, not seeing these big ticket items in the lesson will help you generate where you want the conversation to go. And then what were the students doing well? They were participating, they were partner sharing, she was definitely well planned, and she was utilizing vocabulary. So that might be what a lesson looked like for that 3-minute video that we saw. Now, I've been barreling through on this Zoom, and I haven't stopped for a second to ask for questions, but now I'm going to stop and ask, are there any questions moving forward using the lesson look fors, your classroom visits, and any expectations for the classroom visits in general? Okay. Okay, good. So we're still on the week of February 18th. It's a good idea to talk with your mentee about how they could use their instructional day to their advantage. Let your mentee know that they can create a planning day for themselves. They can go visit other teachers. They can really do anything. The only caveat is that they would need to check in with their administrator, and it's always good practice to let their administrator know what they're up to. That's the only thing. So also share with your mentees what you've done with your instructional days to help them generate some ideas. Okay, last week, as always, it's the recap of the reading, the first days of school reading. So I'm hoping that the big takeaways from the reading is that the learning target, what you want students to know or be able to do, should not be a mystery to students. It should never be a mystery. It should be super transparent, and it should be transparent to students. It should be transparent to you as the mentee and the teacher as well. So, and again, I always tell teachers it's perfectly okay to announce it at the beginning of the lesson. It all starts with the learning target and then matching the engagement activities to the learning target. Another kind of big idea for the reading for this week is that Wong uses that he calls it the learning triangle with the objectives, the assessment, and the instruction, and those pretty well match the lesson look fors. I mean, you're really looking for the same things, but it's just organized in a different graphic. So these are the SPED specific big ideas from your chapter that you read in the 10 components for success in the special ed classroom. It's chapter 7. So if you are a SPED teacher, I put your big ideas on your Foursquare for this week. So I'm really starting to differentiate between the general ed and the special ed. Here's the March reading, pages 243, 276 in the first days of school. And for SPED folks, chapter 8. And I sped through a slide. The next Mentor Zoom is March 6th. And before we get going, as always, I want you to get into your drives, make sure that you can find your February Foursquares. And meanwhile, while you're doing that, I'm going to drop the February checklist into the chat. You can have a look at that. And I'm here for questions. I'm here for concerns. I'm here for anything that didn't make sense to you. While that's happening, get into your Google Drive, make sure you can find and you know where your February Foursquare is. And as soon as you got that under control, give me a thumbs up, and then feel free to log off, and I'll see you next month. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Marilyn. Thanks, Natalie, Rob. Holly, do you need a little support on the Google Drive, or do you feel pretty confident about using Google Drive?
You mean finding the Foursquare?
Yes.
Okay, I know where it is and I bookmarked it up to the top of my
Perfect.
tab, so
Perfect.
I'm going to it.
That's the best way. If you start that it's not, if you star it, you know, and you go into your starred tab, it's sitting, you know, you can easily find it that way. Because if you're like looking at all the shared files and you're going through emails looking for the link, that's a hassle and a half. So if you just use the starred and you've done that, then you're ready to rock and roll and move forward. Now,